Imagine standing against the cool surface of a kitchen wall, the very same one where your parents once marked your growth with frantic pencil lines and celebratory dates. You reach up, expecting to feel the familiar level of a shelf or a door frame, only to find that your hand lands just a fraction lower than it did a decade ago. It feels like a glitch in the matrix. We are taught from childhood that height is a trophy we earn through puberty, a permanent biological achievement that stays locked in place once we reach our early 20s. But then, the middle years arrive, and the ruler tells a different story. You aren't imagining it, and your shoes haven't just lost their tread. You are experiencing a quiet, vertical retreat that is as much a part of the human story as gray hair or wisdom lines. Today, we are going deep into the skeletal architecture to understand why we lose height as we get older. The journey of our height is a tale of two halves. During our first 2 decades, our bodies are in a frantic state of construction. We rely on growth plates, those specialized zones of cartilage near the ends of our long bones, to push us toward the sky. Once these plates ossify and fuse, usually by age 21, our maximum verticality is set. For a while, the status quo holds firm. But as we cross the threshold of our late 30s and early 40s, the biological ledger begins to shift. On average, a person will lose about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch every decade after 40. By the time you reach your 80th birthday, you might find yourself 2 or even 3 inches shorter than you were in your prime. This isn't a sudden collapse, but rather a slow, microscopic compression occurring in the very core of your being. To understand where those inches go, we have to look at the centerpiece of human posture, the vertebral column. Your spine is not a rigid pole. It is a sophisticated stack of 24 movable bones known as vertebrae. Between each of these bones sits an intervertebral disc, a marvel of biological engineering that functions as a hydraulic shock absorber. When we are young, these discs are plump, juicy, and comprised of about 80% water. They give us our spring and our height. However, as the decades pass, these discs undergo a process called desiccation. They literally begin to dry out. Like a sponge left on a counter, they lose their fluid volume and begin to flatten. Because there are 23 of these discs in your spine, even a tiny loss of a few millimeters in each one compounds into a significant loss of total height. It is the cumulative effect of 23 tiny cushions losing their loft. But the discs are only part of the structural mystery. We must also consider the framework itself, the bones. Our skeleton is far from a static cage. It is a living tissue in a constant state of remodeling. In a healthy young body, specialized cells called osteoblasts build new bone at the same rate that osteoclasts break old bone down. As we age, the demolition crew starts to work faster than the construction crew. This leads to a decrease in bone mineral density. In more advanced stages, this becomes osteoporosis, where the internal lattice of the bone becomes porous and brittle. When the vertebrae become weak, they can suffer from silent compression fractures. These aren't the dramatic breaks caused by a fall, they are tiny collapses of the bone under the weight of your own body. As the front of the vertebrae compresses more than the back, the spine begins to tilt forward, creating a curvature known as kyphosis. This shift in the internal geometry of the spine is a primary thief of our vertical stature. The story of our shrinking frames is also a story of chemical messengers. Hormones act as the foreman of our skeletal job site. In women, estrogen is the primary protector of bone density, keeping the breakdown of bone in check. When menopause hits, estrogen levels plummet, and the rate of bone loss accelerates sharply. This explains why women often experience a more rapid decrease in height during their 50s and 60s compared to men. Men have their own protective shield in the form of testosterone, which also aids in bone maintenance. While testosterone levels do decline with age, the drop is usually a gentle slope rather than a cliff, meaning men often retain their bone density, and their height, for slightly longer. However, no one is entirely immune to the slow pull of time and the shifting tides of internal chemistry. Beyond the bones and the fluid, there is the engine that holds it all up, the muscular system. We often forget that standing tall is an active process that requires immense energy. The anti-gravity muscles, the deep stabilizers of the core, the erector spinae in the back, and the glutes, work tirelessly to keep us upright. As we age, we often encounter sarcopenia, the natural loss of muscle mass and strength. When these supporting cables weaken, the skeleton begins to succumb to the relentless downward pull of the earth. We begin to slouch, our shoulders round forward, and our pelvis might tilt. This postural collapse can make us look and measure significantly shorter, even if our bones are relatively intact. It is a reminder that height is not just about the length of our parts, but the strength of the system that holds them in alignment. Speaking of the pull of the earth, we cannot ignore the role of gravity itself. We are all living under a constant, invisible weight. In fact, you are actually a victim of gravity on a daily basis. If you measure yourself first thing in the morning and again right before bed, you will likely find you are nearly a full centimeter shorter in the evening. This is because a day of walking and sitting compresses the fluid out of your spinal discs. During the night, while you are horizontal, those discs rehydrate and reset. However, as we get older, our tissues lose their bounce-back ability. The recovery that happens overnight becomes less complete. Over thousands of days and nights, this daily compression leaves a permanent mark, as the body slowly loses the battle against the constant 9.8 meters per second squared that tethers us to the planet. While this process is a universal part of the human experience, it isn't entirely written in stone. Genetics certainly play a role. Some families seem to possess sturdier skeletons that resist the shrink better than others, but our choices matter immensely. We now know that bones are like muscles, they respond to stress. Weight-bearing exercises, such as walking, hiking, or lifting weights, signal the body to keep the bones dense and strong. Nutrition acts as the raw material for this maintenance, with calcium and vitamin D serving as the essential bricks and mortar. Conversely, habits like smoking or heavy alcohol consumption can act as biological solvents, leaching minerals from the bone and accelerating the thinning of the discs. We may not be able to stop the clock, but we can certainly influence how fast it ticks. It is also vital to recognize when height loss moves from a natural transition to a medical red flag. While losing an inch or two over 40 years is a standard part of aging, losing that much in a year or two is not. Rapid height loss can be the first indicator of significant spinal issues or systemic health problems that require intervention. Doctors track height during annual physicals for exactly this reason. It is one of the most honest metrics of our internal structural integrity. A simple measurement against a sliding scale can tell a physician more about your bone health than a dozen complex questions, making that old-fashioned office scale one of the most important diagnostic tools in the room. Ultimately, the loss of height is a physical manifestation of a life lived. It is the record of every step taken, every load carried, and every breath drawn. It is the story of our bodies becoming more compact, more seasoned, and more deeply rooted. We don't just shrink, we settle. Our discs lose their water so that they can provide a different kind of stability, our bones remodel to reflect our history, and our muscles adapt to a changing pace of life. It is a biological recalibration that reminds us we are dynamic creatures, constantly changing from our first growth spurt to our final years. The human frame is not a static monument, but a living, breathing, and ever-shifting structure. So the next time you find yourself adjusting the rearview mirror in your car or noticing that a favorite coat feels a little longer than it used to, take a moment to appreciate the science behind the change. It is a complex dance of hydraulics, cellular remodeling, hormonal shifts, and the relentless grip of gravity. It is the quiet reality of being human in a world governed by physics. Our height may decrease, but the story of how we stood, and how we continue to stand, only grows more profound with time. It is just one more simple thing with a hidden, intricate history. Thank you for watching. If you have noticed these changes or have a story about the simple things in your own life, We would love to hear from you in the comments. Your insights help us continue exploring the world around us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time as we uncover the extraordinary stories hidden within the ordinary world.